Welcome, welcome. We're glad to have Kristen Ellefson and Bindu Chanagala on the program today, both from the Sloan Fellows MBA class of 2023. Bindu and Kristen met at MIT Sloan and founded a company together called Nurtur. They also went through the Delta V program at the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship, and we are very excited to hear from them today about their experience, their entrepreneurial journey, and the impact that they are making on maternal mental health. So Jackie Selby will moderate a conversation today with some prepared questions, and our audience members can add questions and comments via the Q&A panel in your Zoom interface. So thank you again for being with us. Jackie, Bindu, Kristen, thank you, and I will let you take it away.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Greg, and thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us. We are thrilled to kick off the holiday season and the end of our 2024 calendar year by welcoming Kristen and Bindu to join us today to, as Greg mentioned, share insights from their entrepreneurial journey on the very important topic of maternal mental health. So Kristen and Bindu, thank you very much for being with us and for taking the time to share your experiences with our alumni community. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Couldn't be more excited to be here.
Thank you. So before we begin and move into the questions that we've prepared for today, Kristen and Bindu, I'd like to ask you to just share a little bit about your background and experiences that will inform our discussion today. Kristen, would you start?
Awesome. Well, Jackie, thanks so much for kicking us off. I'm so excited to be sharing a little bit about our journey here with you today. When Jackie sort of shared her vision for these introductions, she said, how can you talk about things that maybe someone couldn't get from a written bio from you? So with that, maybe we'll go a little deep. We'll make it kind of yarn, or for Sloan Fellows, we had our fun Friday, where we would just go really deep and share with each other. So I think what really called me to, forge my career was my little brother actually he was diagnosed with depression at the age of 5. And so I found myself from a very young age sort of being his champion, helping him to live his best life and get the most out of his world. And so from there, that really informed me to join programs like Teach for America, where I was a special education teacher in an inner city school, led me to Autism Speaks, where I was in charge of their strategic partners group. And eventually, after leaving the nonprofit world, went into healthcare technology. So found myself in sales teams there, selling all across the world in every channel in healthcare. But finally realized I needed a new challenge, and that is where Sloan, and specifically the Sloan Fellows program, found me. So I'm so grateful to have joined that program, been a part of the MIT community and family, and that's where I met Bindu most importantly. So I'll turn it over to you, Bindu.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you, Jackie. It's so great to, wake up every day and work on a problem that you're so passionate about. Just not the passion, plus also we are curious, continuously researching on how to do this well. So I'm Bindu Chanagala. I'd say my experiences came at the later stage of my life. The lived experiences in the US, being a mother of 5, which one of the pregnancies ended up in a loss. So that is when I think it all started for me in terms of what is maternal mental health and how can a nation like US could do better in this, right? So this has always been on my mind. Although I started my my career in financial services, pretty boring. I moved to US when financial crash happened, not the best time to do a move. But the best thing that happened is I made the most amazing pivot in my life. I pivoted to healthcare. I worked for Intermountain Health and Select Health, an amazing payer provider system that does such a great job. I initially thought I'd maybe give them a couple of years because I usually get bored in 2 to 3 years. I wanted to find a new challenge. But I spent 13 years of my life there because my professional life there because I loved the work we did. I got to manage brilliant engineers where we are behind the scenes, but I loved the impact that we were creating to the patients and members that that needed us the most when they are in vulnerable situations. So that's where healthcare has my heart, and here we are. So back to you, Jackie.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Bindu. Thank you, Kristen. So Kristen, I'd like to start with you to kick us off. So As Greg mentioned in the beginning, that you and Bindu started nurtur when you were students at MIT Sloan Fellows program, and you took advantage of multiple startup resources, as Delta V, as Greg mentioned, but also Sandbox and then MIT Solve. Could you talk about how you navigated the MIT ecosystem to launch nurtur?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll try to thread this needle where I think some of you guys are still in school and maybe there's an opportunity to take some of this as advice. And some of you are alumni like us. And so it's more just fun anecdotes for you. But one thing that's really unique about the Sloan Fellows program, it's a 1-year full-time executive MBA. So when I think about the MIT entrepreneurship ecosystem, you get just one pass at the ecosystem. So every single thing that's available to students, you want to make sure that you take your shot at it, hopefully get it and make it work and make it support your vision for a company. But I'll say I didn't come to MIT to start a company. It was almost an accident in some ways. Right before coming back to school, a really good friend of mine let me know that she had struggled with postpartum depression, and it was really devastating to learn that it was something she had hidden. So hidden it from friends like myself and also from her doctor, who tried to screen her for postpartum depression, but she didn't think that she could accept this help, and lots of complexities baked into this. But that sort of made us start thinking about the problem at MIT, forging it in different classes like the famous New Enterprises, and even Innovating for Impact with Jason Jay. Wrote a 10-page paper just sort of understanding the competitive landscape of the maternal mental health market, and trying to figure out why my friend had fallen through the cracks and why others were falling through those cracks as well. So from there's amazing courses during IAP. I'm pretty sure that the applications just went out for that as well. So MIT Fuse. And we also did a sort of the sister program of Fuse. But really, I think that's where nurtur really took off, is Bindu and I had met, and we both had a passion for postpartum depression. So I can't wait for her to share her side of the story in a second. But essentially, a friend in the Sloan Fellows was like, "You're talking about postpartum depression. She's talking about postpartum. Can you guys just get coffee?" Then we committed to building nurtur, forged it in some of the additional classes you can take at Sloan and beyond. Bindu took a really cool engineering class that she should talk about. And we told ourselves that if we got into MIT Delta V, that was the sign we needed to really do this full time. So you can imagine we took off spring break. Everyone else was having such a fun time, and Bindu and I were running around campus, filming ourselves for the video component of the application, and really working super hard on those essays. I don't think ChatGPT was where it is today, so a little more manual. But long story short, that's kind of what kicked it off and got us here. And Bindu, do you want to share about maybe the class you took and the yeah.
Absolutely. So I tried my best to stay away from entrepreneurship in general, but it's so hard to do that at MIT. The energy is great. I've been in the audience, for Delta V presentations, and the energy is like so crazy. I remember walking away in the middle of it because, I need to snap out of it. This is not for me. I have a busy family life. I will probably go back to another healthcare system, or even back to Intermountain or Select Health as a senior leader, and, call it good, do a 9-to-5 job. That's what I thought. Wanted to stay a little comfortable, but I think MIT is a place to stay curious, right? So I stayed curious. I kept my options open, and I'm very fortunate to be able to be in a position to do that. And yeah, I think I started this whole entrepreneurship journey a bit late, but one of my favorite classes is Money for Startups. And a story on how I got into that class is another day, thanks to a Sloan fellow buddy who kind of, helped me to get there. And the professor there, Professor Losberg, she's my personal kind of mentor, advisor to us, so it just led to so many other beautiful things. I think Delta V is the thing where I told Kristen, if I have to come on board full time, making some of personal sacrifices, I wanted a stamp that, okay, Delta V said yes, and I said yes to nurtur.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. It's an amazing story. And thank you for sharing. So Bindu, I want to stick with you. So you mentioned that the entrepreneurial the entrepreneurship kind of permeates throughout the ecosystem at MIT, and I wholeheartedly agree. So could you talk a little bit more about how your experiences at MIT shaped this startup journey for you?
Absolutely. I would first start off with some of the core classes that we had to take as Sloan Fellows. It's a busy course. We do 2 years worth of program in like 1 year, and they would throw all kinds of classes at us. And one of the first things I thought was classes like accounting or financial management, like which is like corporate finance. Like I don't know, like I've never taken those classes and I don't know how it would benefit me. I think I was one of the first ones who complained about those. But surprisingly, at the end of it, I actually loved the entire experience of the learning and the growth that happened in those classes. One of the ways that you could check the pulse of a startup or a company, even your own personal finances, is the runway, right? Like, what's your runway? What's your burn rate? All of these concepts that I learned there was super helpful in terms of managing, nurture today. I would also say in terms of, even the healthcare club, being part of the healthcare club and running the programs there. So there was the one pitch competition that happens every year. So I was in charge of contacting investors and VCs to be able to be panelists and judge the pitches. So that is the first time I was kind of exposed to the investors world and had that initial interactions with them. Yeah, I could go on with all the exposure that I received there. I think something that is super close to my heart is our cohort. I think everybody comes from different parts of the world, bring their rich, diverse experiences into the classrooms. We actually had amazing entrepreneurial examples because people have run companies, have been CEO of their companies, took a nice break to come and reshape themselves. So just listening to their own experiences, I think that's the best part of this whole MIT ecosystem, and how they actually rallied and championed, for nurture was another big thing for us, for both Kristen and I. We always rely on our cohort to brainstorm ideas. We know that we have people that we send a message or jump on a phone call that we could brainstorm the current state of whatever we are going through in a company or even personally, that people are willing to give their time and talent and share that with us. So
That's wonderful. And you're right, it's a very powerful network, and I'm glad that everyone has been so supportive of your journey. That's fantastic to hear. So I'd like to position the next question to both of you because, as was mentioned earlier, you founded nurtur to predict and prevent postpartum depression. So could you both share a little bit more about the catalyst for nurtur? And Kristen, we can start with you.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the story I teased earlier about my friend who had postpartum depression and couldn't access care, even though care was right in front of her. And that really, kind of shook up our understanding of why do we let people get this far down a path where they can't access care. And so we thought to ourselves, what if you could predict postpartum depression? So machine learning is becoming more and more common in different areas in healthcare. And so when we started researching the landscape of, can we use that to predict someone's risk for postpartum depression before they have any symptoms? We found that this is actually possible. It's a very homogeneous form of depression, ideally suited for this. But shockingly, no one was doing it, especially in the US. We have worse data sets than many other countries, but also women's health tends to get, less resources in general. So we decided we wanted to be the people doing that, recruited an amazing chief science officer who's the only person doing this in the US. And from there, we were really patting ourselves on the back because like, okay, now we can predict postpartum depression. Surely we've changed the outcome for everyone. But unfortunately, we discovered there's another bottleneck as well impacting this area, and that's the shortage of behavioral health clinicians. More than half of all of Americans are living in a behavioral health clinician shortage area. And what we realized is there's wait lists of up to 12 months if you get diagnosed with postpartum depression. So what we realized we had to do again is now use some sort of technology to make the existing clinician base more efficient and more effective. And we turn to AI again for that. So it's the perfect time to basically take an interpersonal therapy, a scripted therapy that's proven to prevent postpartum depression, and now deploy it with a large language model to make it very scalable and accessible to pregnant moms and those that are, living further away from clinicians. So now they're able to access this content that teaches resilience and outreach to network and community building, challenging Black and white thinking, and all of this has a preventative effect. So really exciting that we can predict postpartum depression, offer something that gives those high-risk patients basically an opportunity to potentially never experience this. But we use this digital health application also as an excuse to build a long-term relationship with this patient so that we're continuing to screen and monitor them. And as soon as they do meet the criteria for needing any sort of mental health help, we're there to support them at that part of the journey as well. So that's sort of the vision of nurtur and how we're able to be a fully managed behavioral health solution.
That's really wonderful. Thank you, Kristen. Bindu, I'd love for you to add.
I think, Kristen said it beautifully in terms of, kind of a snapshot of our journey on when we started the research. At first, we wanted to, let's solve this problem. And then we saw more problems and how do we solve those, right? So I'd say, I think research backs that early interventions are necessary to really help with postpartum depression. I think I'll start off with my own lived experience. I'm from India and I didn't have any dialogue or vocabulary of what I was experiencing. Fortunately, I have an amazing support system in my own house with my husband, and I think one of the reasons it's isolation. I think that's what happens, because as soon as that a baby is here, women tend to isolate themselves just to take care of the baby and not think much about themselves. I think that's where it begins, and it is really important to catch it at the right time. There are, as much as our prevention effect, there's that 53% prevention effect. We also want to figure out what are other interventions that are necessary for the 47% women that will need, different types of interventions. So it's been an amazing journey in terms of staying curious about the problem, learning more about what's out there. The novelty of what nurtur does is we are using existing protocols and bringing everything together. And knowing that OBGYNs are just given 15 minutes for an appointment, that is what the payers would pay for. But we all know that 15 minutes for an OBGYN appointment is not enough, right? So how can OBGYNs leverage solutions like nurtur and ensure that the end-to-end maternal mental health care is taken care of? At the same time, as we are looking at different sales opportunities, we know that people have point solutions fatigue. So we are constantly trying to figure out how can we develop a solution that actually meets the needs of the current reality.
Well, Bindu, thank you for sharing that and sharing your personal experience as well. So building upon that in your experiences, could you speak to what you're seeing across the landscape of women's mental health and postpartum depression? What are the trends that you're seeing?
Absolutely. 40% of the births in this nation is taken care of by Medicaid. Medicaid pays for it. So, and that is a population that also struggles with accessibility, right? So I think nurtur has a solution that will also resolve the accessibility part of it. We have, these, healthcare deserts where people don't have access to healthcare. When I often, remind this about myself, in a situation that I'm in, and I often talk to Kristen about it. Let's say if we both have a certain healthcare issue, we would just get up and schedule an appointment and go for it. Not everyone has that opportunity, to do that. So it's really important as we build solutions that accessibility is one of the main things. And thanks to a lot of policy mandates, they are mandating multiple screenings throughout the prenatal and postnatal checks. But unfortunately, 40% of women don't make it to their postpartum checks. And the number is actually worse for women of color. 60% of them can't make it to their appointments. Can you imagine having two jobs? And if you end up being a single mom, you have to now take the time to go to an appointment. You're like, okay, fine, I'm just doing you as a mom, you tend to keep yourself, one of the last persons to take care of in situations where you have, little babies. Only pediatricians see moms more than their own PCPs or OBGYNs. So we know that there's a gap in care, and how do we really, cover that gap? Most recently, Kristen and I had an amazing opportunity to be part of the health conference, and we met amazing people with incredible pioneers in startup ecosystem, in the healthcare industry, and we are grateful to be part of that ecosystem and bringing up some change, and hopefully we continue to cover all the different market segments and continue to grow. So.
Those are really wonderful points. Thank you, Bindu, for sharing that. Those are, like I said, just very important things for us all to remember, and that you're tackling them too. So thank you. So, Kristen, I'd like to turn back to you. This is a very big problem that you are tackling. So, could you please speak to how, as you were building Nurture and even today, how did you maintain a big picture vision and focus while at the same time identifying the best pathway to start and grow the company?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we want so much for patients. We want so much for healthcare to change. And so almost the best thing you can do, or the worst thing that it doesn't feel good to do, but is to hold yourself back a little bit, is what we've realized is healthcare has a lot of misaligned incentives. And so one example is preventative treatment. There's not necessarily a direct reimbursement pathway for that. So healthcare is really a very reactive form of healthcare. And so we've had to get creative to make sure that by being so proactive and having a preventative approach, we can make sure there's a commercially viable opportunity here. So that's been sort of a fun conundrum as we've been going. But luckily, with Sloan, we've been taught to ask the right questions and really understand all the stakeholders aligned in these processes so that we can make sure there is a commercially viable path here. But some other interesting things, we're dying to do, for instance, like there's some interesting paths you could do with wearables, for instance. But going back to Bindu's point, with Medicaid covering most of the births in this country, we needed to make sure that what we were doing was really scalable and affordable for every single person, because that's the number one focus for us, is making sure that accessibility of care is available to every single woman and her family. So that sort of kept us on a path as well, making sure that we have that guardrail. The last thing I'll say is, we have so many male allies on this call, for instance, and we were shocked to learn that 1 in 10 men or spouses will actually have postpartum depression. So even the partner that doesn't necessarily give birth, this is something that impacts them. And if your wife or birthing partner has postpartum depression, the odds that you as the spouse will have it go up drastically as well. So I always like to think about, there's kind of two basic pathways that kind of push someone into potentially having postpartum depression. And the first is physical, hormonal, a lot of things are traumatically happening to your body with a birth. But the second pathway is a lifestyle change. So overnight, you are isolated, like Bindu said earlier. You are struggling with sleep, you're lactating, et cetera. So that secondary pathway is what we're able to really impact with our preventative self-guided therapy. And so this is where we're very excited on the roadmap as well, to be supporting not just women, but actually the whole family unit, because there's a huge opportunity for men to get support at this critical time, but they're falling through the cracks, I think, even worse than women, because women do have an OBGYN in the loop. They tend to see the pediatrician more afterwards and receive screening there, but men don't necessarily have that direct medical appointment in order to start receiving help at this time.
That's really important, and thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely, and for tackling that big problem. So, Kristen, I want to stick with you because you had mentioned AI, and that it seems like it's a key component of your business. And of course, it is the topic that everybody is discussing these days. So, I'd like for you to just share a little bit more about how you thought about incorporating AI into your business.
Yeah, so there's a few interesting things that I think impact our market segment more than others. So first of all, we are working with childbearing age patients for the most part. So Gen Z is truly the ones who are the most excited about AI. They're the most competent with it. And what this means is they're the most excited to do some of their therapeutic experiences on a smartphone device or using AI. And some of the benefits are actually a lower stigma. So you actually feel more comfortable revealing deep or maybe not like less palatable thoughts to someone like, and we call our chatbot's name Naomi. So someone like Naomi who doesn't judge you and is really just there to pull the best possible insights for you. So really interesting way to make sure that patients can access more care because they're, especially in rural environments, for instance, you're just not able to, with a small child, go to as many appointments or tear yourself away for a telehealth appointment. So this is truly, I think, the best way to bring therapy to as many people as possible. But other interesting tailwinds that are working for us, there's also more acceptance of using AI in a predictive manner in healthcare. So women and other patients as well feel very comfortable that AI could catch a problem before it starts. And so there's already a comfort level with this population. But one other thing we have to consider is AI the right tool for every single patient in every single situation? In healthcare, it's going to generally be about a decade behind other technology sectors. We're very aware that lives hang in the balance and any decision that's made. And so we're also seeing a slower uptick in AI driven and especially patient facing AI. And I think that's for the benefit of everyone. So we often talk about human in the loop and just ways that we're making sure things are monitored. But knowing that our potential population has a behavioral health element to it, we're very, very strategic in our deployment of AI. So we have a very scripted environment for patients. And then we also make sure that we have a lot of checks and balances in terms of mental health checks in general, and make sure we can get the clinical care team in the loop if any issues arise as well. So I think that's what I would say about AI and healthcare in general is the appetite is a little bit weaker, but I think everyone should be building AI tools just like we are in other sectors, but be prepared to have slower sales cycles and, just make sure that you have more checks and balances as well.
No, absolutely. Those are really important points. So, Kristen, kind of building upon that and looking at AI more broadly and beyond just nurtur, what advice would you offer for other business executives that are on this call today that were seeking to do the same, to add AI to their business?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to some of the point I made earlier, which is a lower stigma. So when you're conversing with an AI agent, there's less judgment. And so I know in my personal use of it, use it as kind of that safe space to talk to the world's greatest advisor on any given subject. And so I know that's an opportunity for all businesses is really to allow people to have access to the best possible insights to make them a better employee, or in our case, a patient with the highest possible resilience and most information at their fingertips. So when I think about AI and where are we going and how could others on this call utilize some insights in that, I think just understanding that it can be a very safe space. So feeling comfortable to reveal a weakness because you don't know something, or in our case, maybe an intrusive thought about motherhood. I think those are some really powerful ways that AI is shaping this current generation.
Absolutely. Those are really good points. Thank you. So I'd like to turn the next question over to both of you, please. There may be entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs on the call today. So I would love to know what advice you would offer any of those aspiring entrepreneurs, given your experiences and your journey to date. And Bindu, would you like to start?
I would love to. So, I always say, you may have the greatest idea that would generate revenue on day one. The most important thing is you could have a B grade idea, but you need an A grade team. So, I think who you co-found a company is super important. values and principles alignment you have, because when push comes to shove, that all surfaces really quickly. So you need to really have clear vision in terms of who you want to partner with. And also bring, how do you build a great team? Because you could have amazing ideas, but you need people to really implement things. So I think we have been very, very, in a way, blessed to have the MIT ecosystem, because everybody that comes and talks to us, MIT already vetted them. And for us, all we need to figure out is, where do we utilize their skill set to advance nurture to that next level. So yeah, that's that way we've been very fortunate in having the right team. And I think as founders, it's amazing to partner with Kristen because of that values and principles alignment. However, we also agree to disagree on some things and do what's best for nurture. I don't want to paint this rosy picture that, oh, every day we get along. No, we both are two different individuals with two different ideas and two different backgrounds, right? Like with Kristen's amazing sales and, technology background, plus for me, having experience with engineering teams and how operations could come together to build a system that is important for the end user. So with these diverse experiences, we come together and figure out the best route to take and what's best for nurture. So yeah, I think for me, I would say find the right people. That's the most important job you have as a founder.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. And Bindu is totally the rock of our entire startup. And so just couldn't agree more. Just we're so lucky to have, we see eye to eye on many things. Our differences also make us stronger, but also I think being in a startup, I would say, is like a roller coaster. And so I always say that pretty much if you've had a corporate job, picture the best day ever at that job and then the worst day ever at that job. And that's every day as an entrepreneur. The highs are really high, the lows are really low. But it is just such an amazing experience. And it's amazing, what we're able to do here for postpartum depression. I think one thing that really stands out in this experience is how you're basically creating as you go, and you're kind of a crazy person. I was talking to some entrepreneurs about this yesterday. Entrepreneurs are literally looking at the world with all the companies that exist and saying, no, I think that there's something missing, and I think I'm the best person in the world to do this. And so there's a level of crazy about that. And so you definitely need a ton of resilience to do this. Sometimes it feels like our full-time job is just getting advice. And so on a given day, I probably hear that we're doing it incorrectly about 5 to 10 times. And you take the right pieces of advice and you learn to refine and, hopefully not have too much hubris and really see when you're going down the wrong path and not be afraid to kill your darling. But at the end of the day, still be crazy and still believe that you have what it takes to forge this new path in something that's never been done before. So yeah, if anyone's interested in entrepreneurship, I think that's my takeaway is be prepared to be crazy.
And if I may steal, one of Kristen's, quotes usually, don't be afraid to kill your darlings, So I remember we went in thinking we'll do a social connection aspect, and then we pivoted. So now I'm at a phase where if we don't pivot in often, I get scared that we are just working in this bubble and we are not in touch with the reality. Like, for example, our pilot clinic uses paper forms, and we were like, oh, AI, gung-ho about technology. And we had to go back and, build like an OCR tech initially to figure out how do we meet their daily workflow needs, right? So it's really important to be in touch with the reality and also be open to pivot. And sometimes these pivots may happen every day or every hour of the day at the initial stages. So.
Yes, thank you for those insights. You are very important and very well articulated, so I appreciate it. So now we want to turn over to audience submitted questions. So there already are a few in the chat, but please feel free to continue to share them with us, and we will address as many of them as possible in the last 20 minutes or so that we have. So with that, we'll start with one that was received in advance of today's session. So how did you get up to speed on public health? And did you have any medical training prior to launching nurtur?
I love this question because, I have less healthcare experience than Bindu, to be sure. And after 5 or 6 years, I still feel like a newbie to healthcare. I think it's one of the most complex industries you can be a part of. So many things go into it. You can be the direct clinician, or in my case, I was working in a healthcare technology organization that focused on interoperability and data exchange. So the best thing you can do is go really deep and be subject matter expert in your domain. But I think unless you've been in healthcare since you were a child, you're going to be learning something every single day. And Bindu, how would you add?
Oh my gosh, I've been in healthcare a month short of 13 years, right? But I've been on the system side of things. A lot of times it's like taking requirements and building something that's useful, but then you want to know how those decisions are made. Who are the policymakers? When are those policies must be implemented? Sometimes we often used to say, things get done based on who's shouting the loudest, but then you have to really suffice that noise and really figure out what is the actual deadline, versus who's yelling. I think even with this experience, I probably know just a drop in the ocean. Healthcare is super, super complex. And every single day, and thanks to Kristen, she has amazing research eyes, and she takes the time to research, ensure, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. So we are doing the right thing as we build nurtur. And sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I need more attention to that detail and still continue to learn. So, I guess to answer that question, we both don't have clinical experience, but what we do have is knowing what we know and what we don't know. So we are not afraid to raise our hand and say, you know what, I'm so sorry, I don't have experience in this. Please help me understand. Would it make sense for us to sit down and talk about it? And then both of us trying to put our heads together to figure out who is that expert that we need to hire to take nurtur to that next level. So,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I would say the same thing. My favorite entrepreneurs that I listen to that have talked in like programs we've been in, like Techstars, et cetera, they all say, I hired people much smarter than me. And I would say the person that comes to mind right now is our Chief Clinical Officer, Shihan Fisher, Dr. Shihan Fisher, world-renowned, researcher and practicing clinician in perinatal mental health disorders. He keeps our eye on the prize in terms of what is best for patients. But the other interesting thing, not having a clinical background, I think was also a superpower in our founding. So when you look at the competitive landscape, most of the other companies were founded by clinicians. And so they took a very clinician lens and wanted to get more behavioral health clinicians in front of patients, which we saw wasn't necessarily scalable in the long run. And we, being more technical backgrounds, we said, how can we use technology to make a difference in this space? And so we found our own niche in that space. And ironically, we're actually currently in conversations to like sell our technology to what would be considered our competition, perhaps, because we took such a different path and focused on our strengths in healthcare technology.
Yeah. And by the way, talk about the power of networks. We actually found Dr. Fisher through our MIT cohort buddies. So
Amazing.
That is wonderful. Thank you. So kind of building upon the last question, one of our audience members wants to know, are you leveraging epidemiology or biostatistics to shed light on some of the determinants for mothers' mental health?
I'll tackle that one. So when you let the machine learning algorithm go crazy and sort of build its own algorithm to predict something, you don't necessarily know what factors it's going to choose, and it could come out very accurate, but you don't really necessarily have a very strategic algorithm at the end of that as well. So our chief science officer, he's an MD, PhD in maternal fetal medicine, and also just so savvy with this technology. He really looked at the potential usability of prediction in postpartum depression. And so he restricted the algorithm to only pre-pregnancy factors, which allows us the longest possible window of intervention. So we could tell a woman before she's even pregnant if she will go on to have symptoms of postpartum depression. And the other interesting choice that he made was he restricted the number of variables. So we know in healthcare, things are very fragmented. Interoperability is a dream that doesn't happen very often. So we knew we may have to ask these questions of patients directly via a paper form or a text message, for instance. And so by just restricting ourselves to 8 factors, it takes a patient about 60 seconds to give us the data we need to predict. There's basically 3 key buckets that were shown to be predictive of the 1,000, measures that we had available to us. And it's basically your health going into pregnancy. So we're going into pregnancy older and sicker than ever before, your past mental health challenges, how you addressed those, and then finally, SES status. So basically we use a proxy for that, but all 3 of these factors, and so some of those would be social determinants of health, but all 3 of those factors inform our algorithm, which is 0.98 AUC, area under the curve. So I know you MIT folks are nerding out the way we did when we saw that, but a work in progress. We're very excited to include additional factors. Scalability is really important to us. So we want to be a digital diagnostic and not doing things like devices or blood tests that add cost without necessarily adding much more accuracy, in our opinion. So those were kind of the directives that informed the build out of our predictive side.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And then kind of, I guess, more tech. Oh, go ahead, Bindu. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I think it was a dog.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. So the next question is a bit more tactical. So how do you then bring your program and resources to OBGYNs to get them to focus on postpartum depression?
I think this one's interesting because it really goes into how well do you understand the stakeholder, because there's like a surface level thought that we had before we had too many, I think, interviews with OBGYNs. And so you're like, well, they want to make a difference because they care about their patients, and they really do. This is a really unique clinical relationship where you see this doctor 10 to 12 times during pregnancy. I think they have the most interesting lack of boundaries you'll see in other clinical professions where they have each other's phone numbers, they're texting at midnight. It's truly beautiful. But on the other hand, you actually have to align additional incentives in order to change the clinician behavior. And so we found that a revenue generating component was sort of that missing piece where when the OBGYN is able to help coordinate the behavioral health care, there is basically on average about $300,000 in recurring revenue that a clinic will see by allowing Nurtur to come in and manage that for them. So there's a few different benefits to the OBGYN, but definitely they are really busy. It's really hard to get in front of them compared to other potential sales channels where, a corporate B, if you will, is on LinkedIn all the time, checking their email all the time. OBGYNs, they're very busy, but once you align enough incentives in their favor, they do get excited about this solution.
Thank you for sharing that. So another question, and this goes kind of along the lines of kind of AI and the data that you're collecting. How do you protect personal information and ensure the accuracy of the information when we interact with AI through Nurtur's platform?
I can take that. So, at first we were like, okay, AI, let's do this, and we loved the LLMs and what, systems could do. But our initial model actually hallucinated on us. So we were terrified as, a mom myself. And if I was I always think about, okay, if I'm using this solution, what are some things that I worry about? And privacy is super important for me. So we were like, okay. And as we were looking at the clinically proven protocol, it didn't make sense for us to go into the market with full-on tech versus, how do we limit and ensure there's guardrails around this protocol, because eventually we'll have to conduct clinical trials, and we want to make sure that this protocol is executed the way it is to validate the preventive effect. So that's the first thing. Although, as soon as the healthcare industry and the tech is ready for us, we are ready for it, right? So we are building everything and making sure that we are ready for that day. From a privacy aspect, we are building everything on a HIPAA compliant applications, ensuring the BAAs are in place in terms of data sharing, and with the principles and values that Kristen and I align with, there is never a time that we'll have to sit down and figure out, oh, should we share the data? No, we want to make sure everything is in place and patients know where their data is and who's going to see that. So initially we had like the consent stuff, even with our initial prediction intake forms, we have like lots of consents in place, and listening to those and flagging that so the patients know that their information is going to their provider based on their consent. So I know all the security measures will be in place, are in place, and we are working towards becoming a HIPAA compliant organization, SOC 2. So all of that is on the radar for us. All we need is more time and more money and more resources. So.
So turning to the competitive set, and then also just looking at kind of more healthcare industry more broadly, how do you see other companies working on making an impact in the mental health space?
Yeah, I'll take that. I think I may just say what I said a little bit earlier. And in that we looked at the world differently. I think being technologists, we said, how can we use technology to make the existing clinician base more efficient and more effective? And so we focused on an area of prediction and then prevention, but it's done something really interesting for us. So I like to ask a question. So Jackie, of all the women that have postpartum depression, what percentage do you think are not receiving any care?
Oh, goodness. Let me say 60%.
That's a good guess. You're getting close. It's actually 85%. So 85% of women with postpartum depression are undiagnosed and untreated. And so what we realized is using machine learning, especially with such a high AUC like our model has, we can identify most, if not all, patients that will eventually go on to have problems, and then sort of create this patient funnel, create a high touch relationship with that patient funnel via our digital health application, and then be the ones providing direct clinical care in a scalable way with collaborative care model if necessary. So what we've done very differently, I guess, is when you look at the competition, they're sort of going after a 15% market of the patients that are diagnosed and seeking care. But using technology, we were able to open up a brand new market with our machine learning algorithm. And as we learned from one of our MIT classes, who owns the patient or the customer? So we now own that care because we are earlier in the patient funnel there.
Thank you very much. So I want to turn to another question that is about building a founding team. So of course you met during your time at Sloan and started coming together, but when you were building out the team members, how did you think about that? So what was the criteria or experiences that you looked for, and did you look outside of the Sloan Fellows program? So could you talk a little bit more about that process?
I think we'll probably both tackle this because I want to say Bindu is a hiring guru. I can't say, maybe I'll just like brag about her for a couple of minutes and then turn it over to her. But she had an engineering team of like 50 under her. And so she's constantly used to keeping her pulse on the hiring environment, always having a few candidates in the wings. And I think she recognizes people that have passion more than anything. So I'll let you talk to, what are you looking for in these interviews? But truly the rock of nurture.
Oh my gosh, thanks, Kristen. I think I would say both of us put our heads together before we decide what's that next skill set that we need in our company. So it's a mutual decision. And once we both agree on the direction, I find all kinds of different avenues to find the right people. If someone is coming from MIT, like it's less work on my end. The only thing I have to figure out is their passion for the problem and also knowing that especially if they have corporate experience, startup is a different beast, like setting the expectations straight, and ensuring that, like transparency, ensuring they know the current state of our company, and we meet their expectations based on what their needs are. So yeah, first of all, passion. And it's just not that I don't want someone coming and just fitting the bill. It's about, okay, how do we stay open and curious about what they bring to the table? Because Kristen and we both are two data points, right? But I want another data point, like saying, okay, maybe, and that's how I functioned even in my previous roles at Select Health and Intermountain. Like, how do we hire people and be open to their ideas, because always fresh pair of eyes and their thinking is so critical. At the same time, I also see for people, seeing people, the value they give to the work that is already done so far, right? So I think that it's a mutual thing.
I would add another thing that I didn't think we would spend so much time on when we first started this company, but you do part with equity in a lot of these cases when you make offers. And we probably have spent 100 hours over the past year really trying to understand, okay, this candidate, this experience, this passion, how long they'll be with us, and it computes into an equity kind of offer. And so one thing that goes into those discussions is how many people in the world can do what this person does. And so that's been really helpful, I think, to cutting to the heart of, whether it's a machine learning algorithm or being a perinatal mental health expert. It really helps to cut through the noise of, how valuable is this person as a potential team after you go through like the passion and the fit and all those other fun things as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad Kristen brought that up, because all we have is equity when we begin, and eventually it'll be a combination of salary plus equity. But just being careful as you consider your options. I think who you bring onto your team is the most important thing, because if you don't bring the right person, they'll be eating your strategic time for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So
Those are very wonderful and valid points. So thank you for sharing those. And then I think this might be the last question we have time for, but how did you approach identifying and deciding on who your paying customer would be?
I love this. I'm reading the question a little bit as we go as well. Because there is, an impact angle to what we do, but we needed to make sure this was truly a commercially viable opportunity. And so by aligning stakeholders, by finding the place where health insurance covers something, there's value to the patient, and then also value to the clinician, that's where we were able to make this less of sort of, in my background being nonprofit even, right? So less of sort of that just social impact thing, and also just providing pure value to that customer. But that's basically our beachhead market. So we've done a lot of strategic, like especially MIT's Delta V really sets you up to do this. So can't say enough good things about that program for giving us the space to basically interview hundreds of people in this healthcare space. But what we quickly understood is value-based care. It's like a $6 trillion a year market. And so there is a place for what we're doing. It's going to take a few years to get there. And so we use our beachhead market to give us the runway in a self-funding model, so that we're giving ourselves time to get the clinical outcomes data we need to sell into the health insurance companies, the payers, employers, and lots of other amazing opportunities as well in pharmaceutical. So long story short, there's almost too many markets in healthcare. It does take a lot of time to go down every rabbit hole, but especially now that we're fundraising, we can confidently look investors in the eye and tell them this is why the go-to-market strategy is the only one that makes sense in the exact size of those markets.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, Greg, I will turn it back over to you for some closing remarks. But Kristen and Bindu, thank you very much for your time today and for sharing just these wonderful insights with our community. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank
Great.
you.
Jackie, Bindu, Kristen, thank you so much for taking the time today to share more about Nurtur and the work that you're doing on maternal mental health. So really love what you've been saying about staying curious, focusing on the problem that you're trying to solve, and of course, really leveraging the power of the MIT Sloan network and community. So thank you both for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much. It's been an amazing opportunity. We love our Sloanies and beyond. So thank you guys for joining.
All
Yeah,
right.
thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everybody.
See ya.